I've played quite a few games considered classics, but one I've never actually played is the original Halo. I have it on the original Xbox, except the disc just didn't work on my 360, and I don't have an original Xbox, but I have played Halo 3 and enjoyed it. So, when a friend of mine who has played Halo Combat Evolved and also makes YouTube videos reached out to me about doing a collab reviewing a game, Halo definitely stood out to me as something we could do, to get both a newcomer and a veteran perspective on this classic, and to give myself an excuse to play it. So in this video, I'll be offering up a review from a newcomer's perspective on Halo, and I've got Linkmain maybe to provide a more experienced perspective. Do be sure to check out his channel once you're done by this video. Also, by technicality, actually, this is the first bit of Halo media I consumed. That's not relevant for anything in this video, it's just my confession.
I will now take over this part of the review. Thank you, Champion of Hyrule, for setting me up. There are 4 types of factions in the game. Number 1, the Marines, your allies. Number 2, the Covenant, the main enemy you will fight throughout the game. Number 3, the Flood, zombies, and number 4, Sentinels. Going from the Covenant hierarchy first, we have 4 different types of enemies, each with unique attributes and behaviors. The first and loneliest is the common Grunt. Grunts come in 3 tiers: Minor, wearing orange armor and triangle-shaped tanks, Majors, wearing red armor and sometimes cone-shaped gas tanks, and finally, Spec Ops, the highest tier of grunts with many special abilities. As a general rule of thumb, minors in any race are the weakest, majors are the second strongest, and Spec Ops are the strongest. Grunts by themselves are easy targets. They have low health and an exposed foot head that makes it easy to headshot them. In groups, they are difficult to take down, as their overwhelming numbers leave you with not enough ammo to kill them all, and they each pepper your shields from all sides. They have poor dodging capabilities, and their accuracy is quite low. However, they can fire their plasma pistols relatively fast, but not nearly as fast as the other members of the Covenant. Grunts use needlers, plasma pistols, and fuel rod cannons. Most often they will use plasma pistols, but occasionally fuel rod cannons when they are Spec Ops. All types of grunts can carry needlers, however this often makes them weaker. All grunts can throw plasma grenades, deadly instant kill weapons that stick to the player. You can dodge these by listening for their distinct war cries and animations. Grunts also have a behavior known as sleeping. When you find them sleeping, you can instantly kill them, or if you're a sadistic bastard, shoot them to death. Next up is the Jackal. Jackals are support-based units that cannot hold a fight on their own for very long, but are capable of being extremely threatening in groups, particularly with other Covenant members that are not other Jackals. Jackals wear wrist-mounted shields, making it extremely difficult to hit them from the front. However, they have an exposed section on their left hand that they use to fire their gun. If you hit that left hand, they'll recoil from the shock of being hit and allow you to hit them even further. This is most easily done with the pistol, however any weapon can do it. They also have an exposed head, meaning you can one-shot headshot them. Jackals can also overcharge their plasma pistols, the only weapon that they can use. When they overcharge the plasma pistol, it will instantly drain your shields, and if you have taken any kind of damage to your shields, it will also drain a bar of health. Jackals are extremely weak to melee attacks, as they have no defense against it, with not even a melee attack of their own. Jackal minors and majors can be differentiated by blue shields for the minors and orange shields for the majors. Next up is the Noble Elite.
Hello.
Elites are the backbone of the Covenant military. They have energy shields, just like the player, that take a limited amount of damage before it falls away, and you have to continue shooting them to kill them. Extremely strong, intelligent, and resilient, elites usually try to avoid incoming gunfire, usually strafing or rolling. Hitting with them with grenades is difficult, as they roll out of the way so quickly that even frag grenades that have a short fuse time will struggle to hit them. Elites use plasma rifles, which is different from grunts and jackals who use plasma pistols and occasionally needlers. Plasma rifles do a lot of damage and can be fired extremely quickly, which can easily drain your shield in close quarters and even your health. Plasma rifle bolts are fast and difficult to dodge, and elites often try to predict your movement in order to hit the player. To avoid damage, your movement must stay unpredictable. They require your full attention due to their difficult to dodge attacks, high damage output, and resiliency. Elite energy shields take more damage from plasma weapons, such as the plasma pistols. However, it takes less damage from ballistic weapons, such as the assault rifle. On the other hand, their health once you take away their shields take less damage from plasma shots, but more damage from ballistic weapons, such as the assault rifle and the shotgun, and especially the frag grenade, which will almost certainly kill an elite with their shields down. Elites who lose their shields are still extremely dangerous, even if they are vulnerable. They are prone to raging and blindly attacking the player, dealing a ton of damage, or even killing you. However, higher ranking elites may try to retreat and find cover, trying to recharge their shields. They can be slippery and force you to hunt them down in dangerous positions if you want to take them out. They have a long shield recharge time of 12 seconds. This gives you ample time to try and hunt them down, but at the same time, it also makes the lower enemy units, the grunts and jackals, start fleeing. Killing an elite will make all the grunts and jackals in the vicinity scatter, except for sometimes spec op grunts. This makes elites a priority target. Elites have 5 ranks. The first is the blue miner, the weakest elite. Elite miners are lower than the player. They fire slowly, they don't dodge very often, and they often rush the player blindly and try to get in a weak melee attack, leaving them open to counter attacks and usually a melee to the back, which is an instant kill. Elite miners have the weakest energy shields, taking very little ammo to kill them. Red elite mages are the same as the player. They sport strong energy shields, stronger than the players, but slightly worse health than the players. They fire extremely quickly and use advanced tactics, fighting when supported by other troops, and taking command of troops if a higher ranking elite dies. Elite majors do not use needlers, only plasma rifles, which makes them a much more consistent threat than elite miners. They take tactical skill and good aim to take out, and dodge much more often, almost never raging when they lose their shields, and never trying to go for a melee attack. Gold elite zealots are extremely dangerous. They have incredibly strong energy shields, taking multiple magazines of ballistic weapons to strip, or multiple plasma shots from even a plasma rifle to stop. Aside from their extremely high shield strength, they also fire extremely quickly and make excellent tactical decisions, rolling out of the way, going into positions where it is difficult to grenade, and forcing troops to stay back and wait for the player to approach them. They also use a weapon other than the plasma rifle, the energy sword. The energy sword is a one-hit kill move that is extremely dangerous to fight. The high shield strength and health values of the gold elite makes it difficult to dispatch them before they can get into close range if you do not have a plasma weapon. However, their melee-only nature makes it easy to run away from them by using tricky map geometry. They're often accompanied alone. However, they can be found supported by low-ranking grunts and jackals. The highest tier of elites are the black spec op elites. They have the highest shield strength and fire their plasma rifles so quick that you cannot see their bolts. If you engage with them in a straight up fight and you have a ballistic weapon, you are almost guaranteed to lose if it is not a shotgun or a rocket launcher. If you have a plasma weapon, it is capable of being killed in close quarters, however you will both take heavy damage. They are also found accompanied by Spec Op grunts, other dangerous enemies. The most reliable and easiest way to kill them is by using the noob combo, an overcharged plasma pistol shot followed by a pistol to the head. Elite Spec Ops also gain the ability to throw grenades, much faster and with higher accuracy than grunts. They throw plasma grenades at positions you were hiding at, less likely to throw it at you. This will usually force you out of cover or kill you. However, you can avoid this by simply being mobile and constantly changing your position. Unlike other elites, this elite should be avoided rather than fought. However, there will be times where we have no choice. Hunters are the final Covenant enemy who feel as though they should act as difficult mini-bosses. Despite this, they are one of the lowest entities in the game. In fact, they are the second weakest enemy in the game, lower than even the common grunt. Hunters have giant shields in the front and a ton of armor protecting their exposed weak point at the back and in the neck. Shooting these places with armor does almost no damage, but shooting the exposed orange sections will deal tons of damage. And if you are using a headshot weapon, most notably the pistol, it will instantly kill them if shot in a weak point. Because they can be baited into an extremely slow and easy to dodge melee attack that will leave their exposed back open, killing them is an absolute joke. And whenever you fight them, you should have no trouble, unless you do not have access to their weak point, such as on a different bridge.
Flood ranks. The Flood is the next enemy type. They have role structures as well, but are extremely different from the usual common structures as well as in their tactics. Flood usually runs right at the player, leaving them no time to breathe, but making the Flood very susceptible to being killed by close-range weapons and anything really. However, they attack in large numbers, often overwhelming the player and forcing them to retreat hastily while shooting back at them. They take a lot of damage from any type of weapon, namely ballistic weapons, but plasma weapons still do a lot of damage against them, most notably the plasma rifle. First Flood form is the Infection form, a small easy-to-attack enemy that jumps straight at you and dies instantly to any form of damage. They also die upon hitting your shield, making them extremely weak on their own. However, they attack in gigantic numbers, usually of 30 to 45 per group. They are almost always seen supporting other Flood members, while they deal extremely weak damage. The real combat capabilities are shown in their ability to stop the shield from recharging every time the shield is hit, resetting the recharge counter. This makes it easier for other Flood forms to constantly attack you and leave you low on health. The next enemy type is the Elite Combat form. They are the backbone of the Flood, dealing lots of damage with melee, which they will be mainly using as they rush at you. They can use guns, but are poor shots with the guns and it will not do much damage with them. However, in conjunction with other combat forms attacking you using their melee, they can be extremely annoying and even threatening. They're also unpredictable, sometimes shifting from blindly attacking to shooting and vice versa. They have more health than any other Flood form but have the biggest targets and are the second slowest. They take almost no damage from melee and sniper shots, making it extremely difficult to kill them with either. The other combat form is the Human Combat form. They can also use guns, usually with better accuracy, and can be found using more human weapons. When they wield shotguns, it is extremely dangerous as they can one-shot kill you on almost any difficulty. They are also faster than the Elite Combat forms, rushing the player more often and dealing less damage with their melee, but having a faster melee which is harder to dodge. They have less health than the Elite Come-Out forms, but their smaller frame makes it more difficult to hit them. The final Flood form is the Flood Carrier form. Upon being shot enough, they will explode and spew infection forms everywhere, adding to the ranks of the Flood. When they explode, it is similar to the blast of a grenade, meaning that if you were hit by it you will take a ton of damage. On the flip side, you could also use this to kill other Flood members and make them extremely useful enemies if you find them in a crowd. They take very little damage from energy shots, but any kind of ballistic weapon should be able to kill them, and even 5 shots from the AR, aside from the sniper.
Halo Combat Evolved has a very memorable and striking opening, and I think it's easily the most important moment of the game. Not necessarily the best, but definitely the most important part, and certainly an absolutely genius part. The game's protagonist, Master Chief, is awoken to be used as a weapon against an alien force called the Covenant. For a new-time player, especially in the modern day, over 20 years after this game's release, you then kind of expect this to be a tutorial. A Marine, your main allies in the game, teaches you how to look around and what lights are. You charge up your shields, unaware as to how many times they'll save your life later on in the campaign, and the Marine force feels organized. They feel prepared, and you start to wonder why they needed to wake this dude up from his nap. Immediately you're attacked. This Marine dude runs out with you and is blown up or hit by debris. I can't really tell. But you're on your own now, and this door in front of you is not opening. You run around the station in desperation, without a single weapon to fight back with. You see soldiers being decimated by the Covenant, with barely any words spoken to you. You understand the story of Halo. The terror of the Covenant is made evident to you, even if all that's really happening is you're running away from them. What really makes this genius is the fact that, for the rest of the game, you kind of kick their asses. Sure, it's not a stomp each time, but once you actually get weapons, a bit of that original dread surrounding the Covenant is missing. That's why it was so important for this to be there in the first place, and why this opening is so smart. The Covenant is a genuinely formidable enemy, who in lore have stretched the resources of humanity thin. Obviously from playing the game you understand they're bad, but it's that opening that really teaches you this, and drives home the absolute desperation of humanity. Well, and the manual. Do I need to get into the habit of reading a manual before every old game I play now? Anyways, this desperation drives you, and keeps you motivated to play. To save humanity. Spoilers for the rest of the video, yeah, Halo holds up and God doesn't have a great opening. Battles against the Covenant are probably roughly half of what the experience in Halo Combat Evolved is. And that's good. Great even, because it's a blast. Most of the combat encounters are in open fields, or in long gray hallways inside Covenant spaceships. In open fields, you often have Marine support, and the single greatest video game invention man has ever created, the Warthog. Go ahead and kill yourself right now. I can pretty much guarantee that in heaven, it'll just be a bunch of angels riding around in Warthogs, making clouds of mist out of sinners or something. So the opposite of what the Covenant thinks is happening to them. But we all know about the sheer perfection of the Warthog. I think the main element I enjoy about the battles themselves is the strategy, and how you need to understand your enemies. This feels obvious. You need to know what your enemies do in every first-person shooter, but this is different. The Covenant is different. In Doom 93, for example, an absolute classic shooter. What you need to understand about enemies is this one has a gun, this one runs at you fast, and this one is big and scary. In Halo, you need all those basics. But stuff like grunts will run if they don't have a leader. Certain enemies can carry grenades. Jackals can be dealt with by melee attacks. Elites are often the leaders of the group. And so many more add layers to combat and make it so much more fun. I very much enjoy when a story has a clear structure of power in an organization. I think it's fun and adds depth to the story. It's part of the reason I like things such as Yakuza or One Piece so much. But here in Halo, it's not just a story thing, it's a gameplay thing. And the way strategies surrounding fighting the Covenant mixed with the strategic ways you have to use each weapon is super fun. It's also fun to say fuck strategy, as I somehow make enemies into a paste by bumping into them slightly with a vehicle, as any outliers get gunned down by my soldier buddies. One thing I found interesting is that, since I played Halo 3 first, and I knew how much of a classic that game was, I kind of assumed a lot of things from the series were introduced in that game. Vehicles like ghosts and banshees, and a lot of the game's weapons, those feel like sequel things. But to my surprise, they were all from Halo 1. Not all of them, but all the weapons I actually remember besides the gravity hammer. I'm excited to play Halo 3 again, but I digress. The point is, Halo's a really, really big game too. Especially for the time, and it's just cool. The Halo series is known for having lots of lore, but not many of it is actually present in the game. Like how I mentioned before, the real threat of the Covenant is shown through gameplay, not story. What story that is here is pretty serviceable, does the job, if slightly lacking. For a lot of the missions, you have Cortana guiding you around, mostly telling you what to do. Master Chief is a more reactive character in the game, being given commands since, well, he is a soldier after all. In the end, this means that the game is missing some potential. Master Chief could have been fleshed out more, so could some other important characters like Cortana or Guilty Spark, and more of a personal connection to the Covenant could have been established. However, it doesn't end up being too big of a deal due to the strength of the gameplay, in more ways than one. From a literal standpoint, the gameplay is pretty much supposed to stand higher above the story, and the gameplay also provides you with more of a sense of independence than the story has. Sure, Master Chief might be constantly being told what to do, but in gameplay, he has plenty of independence to do this mission however he wants, and commands respect from the Marines. It makes up for the faults of the story, because the gameplay actually feels like a pretty natural part of it. Sounds obvious, I know, but plenty of other games fumble this part, to the point that the phrase ludonarrative dissonance has been coined. Luckily, Halo has not that much of it. It genuinely makes sense for Master Chief to be doing what he's doing and to be roughly as strong as how strong he is. I'm also told that Halo 2 has more depth with its characters, certainly has more of a personal connection to the Covenant given the Arbiter, so I'm excited for that, although it obviously doesn't affect the story of Halo 1. One other great bit of storytelling in the game actually brings me into a flaw with this game. That is, the Flood. The Flood is a gameplay element that was introduced in an extremely powerful way. Your own allies are turned against you, and you see footage of a platoon that was completely wiped out by these things. It is genuinely fearful, and even as someone who's already familiar with the things from my time playing Halo 3, the game managed to build up a lot of anticipation in me for the Flood. Anticipation as to how fighting these things will be, and well, at first it's great. The Flood rushes at you, explodes upon contact, and uses all sorts of weapons, and overall, they break the pattern you've settled into from fighting the Covenant. It's wild and great. Then comes the library segment. You fight in long, boring, dark hallways that repeat over and over again, and what once was breaking a routine now establishes a new one, an actually boring one. The strengths I mentioned earlier about how there's lots of layers to fighting the Covenant, they don't really apply when it comes to the Flood. The Flood feels like they're literally everywhere later on in the game, and they're so tiring to fight. That's the one word to describe them, tiring. And later missions suffer because of them. Good luck trying to consistently beat them with melee attacks too. I just really wish I could have as much fun fighting the Flood as I do fighting the Covenant, but unfortunately I don't, and this attempt at enemy variety makes the game bland in spaces, and the rare weaknesses of the game rear their ugly head. Even when you fight the Covenant later on with the Flood still present, the Flood just make it that much more boring. The library is one of two spots in the game where environments are repeated over and over for a set amount of time. And both times it's extremely monotonous after a while, and just makes me wish I was at an actually fun part of the game. Luckily it's only twice, sure, but that's 2 points to dread in a playthrough of the game. Plus technically that's actually 3 times, so even more boring parts.
The sandbox is incredibly well balanced. The assault rifle acts as an easy-to-use unshielded enemy killer. 60 bullet magazines and 10 in reserve, you will never worry about ammo. Extremely fast melee. It causes enemies to flinch easily. It deals weak damage against shields, but is usable as an emergency weapon if you have no plasma weapons. Highly inaccurate, it is best used as close to mid-range. At high ranges, it is nigh unusable. The lack of a scope hurts even more. It also performs well against light vehicles. Enemy ghosts and banshees are shredded by the assault rifle, and is the best weapon to deal with them aside from the rocket launcher. The largest issue with the assault rifle is its unreliability against Covenant. Jackals and elites, extremely common enemies, work as excellent counters to the assault rifle and require you to carry a plasma weapon if you intend to use the AR as a primary. The biggest strength is its availability. It is the weapon you start with on each level aside from 2 betrayals and can be found within every level. The Magnum acts as more of a rifle than a pistol. With a 12 magazine count and 10 in reserve, you can reliably use it as a primary weapon. Each shot does high damage, and one-shot headshots. Excellent range and has a 2x scope. It is one of 2%. Despite being ballistic, it deals high damage against elite shields. However, it is best used alongside a plasma weapon, usually a plasma pistol. This lets the player use the plasma to strip the shields, and the pistol to headshot. It's a common weapon, and incredibly useful all the time. However, its effectiveness wanes against the numerical superiority of the Flood and the mechanical might of Sentinels. It can destroy banshees reliably, but will take a lot of couple of magazines. The shotgun is a powerful close-range weapon. It destroys anything in close range, and has a massive amount of ammo. It can still be used at mid-range reliably as well, but high range is a big no-no. With this monster, you no longer need energy weapons. A pistol and a shotgun can easily mop up any enemies. Its biggest weakness, however, is its rarity. Only enemy Flood drop them, and they do not always spawn with shotguns. Simple, but effective. The sniper is, well, a sniper. Low ammo and difficult to use, but any non-Flood enemy will fall within 1 to 3 shots. It has tremendous range and velocity, acting as near hitscan at most ranges. It can kill even shielded elites, and vehicles take heavy damage. The biggest issue is availability. It's very rare, and sometimes you get it on Flood levels where it is useless. The rocket launcher is the rarest and most powerful weapon. It makes short work of infantry, and destroys most vehicles in one shot. However, the splash damage can hurt you as well, and its low rate of N can leave you vulnerable. It also has low magazine count, so you must use it only when truly needed. It is a scarce commodity. The plasma pistol is an incredibly effective weapon. It's extremely common, nearly all enemy types carry it. It has deceptively high battery life, being usable for as many as 4 firefights at a time. It strips shields excellently, and can be overcharged to instantly drain them. This leaves enemies, elites most of the time, vulnerable to gunfire. Yet it is also effective against unshielded targets, with its fire rate being extremely high as long as the player can pull the trigger fast enough. Unlike UNSC weapons, it does not need to be reloaded. However, it can overheat with too much use and will eventually run out of battery. Overcharging wastes a lot of battery too, but also has the benefit of light enemy tracking, even good against the Flood, 3 to 4 bolts usually being enough to kill a combat form. However, it falls off at range, with the slow bolts struggling to hit targets. The plasma rifle is a great close to mid-range weapon. Very common, it is used by all elite types and is almost always at least 80% charged. Automatic, the plasma rifle fires bolts of plasma that drains shields and melts flesh. In close range, it can easily shred all enemies in its path, even high-ranking elites. In mid-range, it requires slight shot leading but is still effective. At long range, it is poor, and not worth using. Its automatic fire has strengths and weaknesses. On one hand, it is easy to use and is good for group combat. On the other, it cannot be overcharged and wanes in effectiveness against multiple high-ranking elites. It kills Flood better than almost every other weapon besides the shotgun. Overall, a reliable weapon for most occasions. The Needler is a bizarre anti-infantry weapon that grunts and low-ranking elites love. With heat tracking needles, the needler sticks needles into the flesh of enemies and explodes. If 7 needles make contact, the enemy will super combine, creating a massive pink explosion, instantly killing the enemy. However, the needles are slow and can be dodged. They also are useless against vehicles, being solely anti-infantry. Uncommon but powerful, the needles are an excellent single-target weapon. Carried occasionally by grunts and elites, these weapons are not threatening but are difficult to dodge in chaotic fights. The final weapons are the grenades. The fragmentation grenade is a powerful anti-infantry and stationary gun device. It has a short fuse time, and explodes around half a second after hitting the ground. It has a monstrous blast radius, and does huge damage to anything caught in its range. Shielded elites won't be killed instantly, but will be weakened greatly. Just about any other enemy will be torn to shreds. As a trade-off for their immense power, they are rare and require good positional awareness to use. The plasma grenade is a lethal tool of destruction the player will rely on greatly. Dropped by Covenant members, this grenade is almost always available and should be used often. It has a long fuse time, taking 3 seconds to explode upon hitting the ground. However, enemy units hit by it directly will be stuck to it. This will almost always kill the enemy. The biggest issue with these grenades is inconsistency. If you can't stick an enemy, it probably won't do much. Halo CE's sandbox is incredibly balanced, and is meant to work with the enemies, not alongside them. Every gun has a purpose, and there are no moments where you truly will be at a loss. Vehicles will be excluded from this part of the review. Why? Well, go play the game yourself, and experience the joy of tanks and jeeps and spaceships galore.
Overall, Halo is a great game. That gets boring at places. However, I did want to say that compared to other first-person shooters, Halo's flaws aren't that pronounced. Look at Half-Life. It was released only 3 years before Halo, and is often compared to it. Oh god, Half-Life released 3 years before Halo. I think that game has a lot more bullshit in it, with cheap segments, unfair deaths. The infamous Zen comes to mind, and all those points where they think this game is a platformer. When compared to that game, on normal difficulty at least, Halo doesn't have bullshit that makes you want to tear your hair out. It has the occasional boring segment or tedious combat encounter, which is still pretty rare. And not to be harsh on Half-Life, I'm not even reviewing that game here, but I honestly think Halo has aged much better than it, and other first-person shooters of the time. It absolutely enters the conversation of the greatest shooter game of all time, although that's a much bigger discussion than this video. Anyways, Halo also ends with a fucking timed escape sequence where you have a warthog. So exhilarating. Legitimately one of the greatest moments in shooter games as a whole. Holy shit, that was an amazing ending. What a game. I'm very excited to try out Halo 2 and some of the other entries in this franchise. With that said, that's going to be it today, so thank you for watching and I will see you later.